dear Medyascope viewers. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. This evening, we'll be talking about mob leader Sedat Peker's videos in which he makes allegations against former and current government officials. Professor Ryan Gingeras will be joining us from California, USA, to speak about the mafia penetration into the Turkish state in light of these recent videos posted by Peker. Peker, who is an organized crime leader, spoke about the Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu in his latest video. This video is the fourth that he has shared in a series of installments on his YouTube channel. In the video, the mob leader said that Soylu had helped keep Peker informed about his lawsuit and had provided him with bodyguards. Soylu responded to these accusations by denying any contact with the mob leader in the past.
In the video that is named "Some People Believe the Tales of the Hunter Instead of the Lion, I Will Be Seeing You," mob leader Sedat Peker accused the Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu with the following statement. "Did you not say they are filing a lawsuit against Sedat Peker? I will let you know if the situation gets critical. Did you not provide me with my bodyguards?" Soylu responded to Peker's claim through a Twitter post that read, "If you had any contact with me at any point of your life, and if that can be proven, I am willing to face any punishment and abasement, including execution, in front of the eyes of my precious nation." Soylu's written statements further called Peker, who, by his own records, has fled to the United Arab Emirates, to return to Turkey and surrender to justice. In accordance, Soylu reiterated his hatred towards the mafia and that he will continue to do what is necessary to fight against the organized crime and terror groups. This is the fourth video that Sedat Peker has shared on his YouTube account since May 2nd. Peker explained the reason behind his sudden decision to speak out. The reasons, he says, was the police raid at Peker's house in Istanbul, where his family resided at the beginning of April. Peker, infuriated by the police that raided his house in front of his family, has been making explosive allegations about some of the former and current political figures through his YouTube videos. The allegations are particularly regarding the former Interior Minister Mehmet Ağar and his son Tolga Ağar, who is currently the Elazığ MP for the ruling Justice and Development Party. In his various videos, Peker pointed fingers at Ağar regarding a suspicious death of a Kazakh journalist in Turkey back in 2019, their illegal and forceful involvement with the Yalıkavak Marina in Bodrum, and more claims about the Turkish government's collaboration with the mafia. Former Interior Minister Mehmet Ağar objected to the allegations made by Peker and said that the state can conduct any type of investigations about him if necessary. Medyascope editor-in-chief Ruşen Çakır evaluated Peker's videos in relation to deep state organized crime connections. Sedat Peker frequently talks about the deep state in his videos, but if we look at all that he explains, there's actually nothing that is really deep that he says. In fact, there is something very superficial. There is a repetition of the past. They're having some sort of problems in between each other, and we don't know what they are. They do not speak about these problems openly, but they send one another encoded messages through social media or through the courts. But when we take a clear look at it, there is no depth in any of these. What is happening here is very simple. The government does not pose any laws on certain kinds of people, and thus the mobs continue to exist through the help of superficial problems like these. Fighting against mobs was one of the most important claims of the ruling AKP when they first came into power. So many years have passed, and we're still talking about the mobs and the underworld in Turkey. Some of the prominent names from the underworld can act like however they want to, can threaten everyone, and nothing happens to them. The biggest example of this is Sedat Peker himself.
This evening, our guest is Professor Ryan Gingeras, a professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at the Naval Postgraduate School in California. Professor Gingeras is an expert on Turkish, Balkan, and Middle East history. He is the author of 4 books and has published on a wide variety of topics related to history and politics in prestigious journals. One of his books, Heroin, Organized Crime, and the Making of Modern Turkey, looks at the historical connections between the Turkish state and organized criminal gangs. Professor Gingeras is joining us today to speak about the mafia penetration into the Turkish state in light of the recent videos posted by prominent mob leader Sedat Peker. Hello, Professor Gingeras. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
So Sedat Peker has been posting a series of videos on his YouTube account where he is throwing around accusations about former and current government officials, including the former Minister of Interior and a major figure of the Turkish deep state, Mehmet Ağar, whose son is a deputy with the AKP at the moment. And in his latest video, he's been speaking about the current Interior Minister, Süleyman Soylu, as well. So just to begin, how would you read these videos and the claims that are being made by Peker in them?
I think up till this morning, I was pretty skeptical. Mm-hmm. I have to say that Sedat Peker has made a career out of speaking not only with the press, but also being very vocal about, the activities, especially of others, with organized crime links. So I think that measuring the veracity of it is difficult because he's been involved in things in the past that have been patently false or have been shown to be parts of a broader sort of fabricated story. I'm thinking specifically of Ergenekon. I think not so much the allegations he made this morning as much as the fact that Mehmet Ağar responded to them and validated the stories in part. And I think that would lead me to believe that this is perhaps a little bit more than gossip. Although, to tell you the total truth, I think that we can't necessarily put our absolute faith in what he's saying. The way I read it is more that what he is saying seems to resonate with the moment, in the sense that there is a sense in Turkey that things are unraveling politically, that there's a sense of uncertainty, and a real sense that that individuals who were formerly more supportive of the government and who were rather outspoken in that support are now turning on each other. And I think that in itself is pretty newsworthy.
Significant, yeah. So you mentioned, yes, that Ağar had responded to the claims, which suggest that there is more to this than just gossip. And as a matter of fact, Süleyman Soylu has also responded to the claims today. He released a statement on his social media saying he would file a lawsuit against the allegations. So what do you make about the allegations in particularly made towards Süleyman Soylu and his response to them?
I think specifically regarding Süleyman Soylu, I can't speak to it directly because I don't have any knowledge of it. Mm-hmm. I think the context, however, is convincing that Sedat Peker has behaved in ways that have been rather provocative over the last several years, and has done so with relative immunity. That his flight abroad has not been necessarily the focus of a great deal of government attention compared to others. We don't necessarily know the nature of his exile, or why precisely, if there was actually any kind of legal case that's pending against him, or any sort of investigation that's pending against him. It's not clear. I think that in this sense, the absence of any evidence at least suggests that the Interior Minister has not necessarily given this any kind of high priority. So if that's the case, then there's perhaps something to the fact that, as Peker suggests, that he's been protected. And I think other aspects of this seem, to warrant that suspicion as well. He was someone who, I think the best way of thinking about Sedat Peker is that he's a celebrity. He's a celebrity with a criminal background, but a celebrity. And that as somebody who is really well known and who had been, very vocal and supportive of the AKP administration, he has been treated a little bit more kindly than other elements of society. And I think that, again, this would give some credence to some suspicion that Soylu perhaps had supported him or had perhaps protected him.
Mm-hmm. So at this point, then we can assume that that protection or that, you know, secret or silent alliance is no longer in the work. So do you think with these videos, Peker is hoping for a negotiation? What do you expect will be the outcome of all of this?
I wish I could say. I don't know. My sense is that in the past, this has never really ended very well. And I think that this is especially the case when, you know, not too long ago during the Ergenekon trials, Sedat Peker was among the more vocal witnesses who substantiated the prosecution's case of an Ergenekon conspiracy. Now here, I mean, we see, you know, Sedat Peker taking a little bit more of an oppositional role in his approach to the government. I'm not sure what necessarily happens, but I'm not necessarily sure that we'll necessarily see him return, at least not under his own will. I don't know how far this will go, for the fact that, you know, there is a lot going on in the world at present, and I think that that Erdogan and, you know, his government has done a rather impressive job of always changing the narrative when it can. And I think that, you know, this story, I think, has had a surprising amount of legs, surprising amount of relevance or resonance with people, given the number of people who have watched these videos, the extent to which that some person like me who lives halfway around the world is talking about it, you know. But on the other hand, given what's happening in Palestine, you know, given the state of the economy, given anything that could happen rather suddenly, I'm not sure how long the story necessarily lasts. It may go on, it may not.
Well, in any case, I mean, you know, whether, you know, Peker's words are just, you know, words and allegations or true facts, what we do, I guess, understand is that there are links between, you know, the state and organized crime, you know, in one way or another from these videos. So, I mean, and you've written a book about this too, Professor. So is this just basically a continuation of this tradition, of this link between organized crime and the state? Is this the way politics have always worked in Turkey?
Yes and no. I mean, I think Sedat Peker represents a generation of people associated with organized crime that were much more explicitly political than past groups, I would say, you know, in the sense that Sedat Peker is quite explicitly partisan. He has a very well-defined ideology or worldview. It may be sort of an ideological mess, but it's still nonetheless he is somebody with a very very defined view of the world, and who is very much actively engaged in politics. And to be more specific, you know, he, along others like Alaaddin Çakıcı, as well as, you know, some, you know, lesser known figures, gained prominence for the fact that they were very strongly associated with the Turkish right, most notably the MHP, and they became strongly associated with government policy in the 1990s, specifically countering the PKK, as well as leftists and Armenian militants abroad. And so that, you know, they represent a very specific moment in Turkish history in the relationship between organized crime figures and the state. I mean, I think, you know, he represents, however, you know, an element of the history of organized crime in Turkey and its relationship with the state, which is still very murky. We don't really know what Sedat Peker does, you know, for a living. We don't know. It's really hard to say what his place is within organized crime, even if he has one. I think this is all predicated on a lot of it is predicated on reputation, as well as past cases that may not necessarily speak to what he does or the full breadth of his activities. And I think this is a very specific trait in terms of the history of organized crime and its political relevance. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I was able to write my book was that the American National Archives has records of investigations into organized crime in Turkey going back to the 1940s, between the 1940s and the 1970s. And so much of what I've written about is, from a generation much earlier. Sedat Peker's generation, has far less documentation associated with it. There is no real archival record, at least that's accessible, that speaks to the 1990s or the 1980s, not only in the United States, but in Turkey as well. And Turkey is, the Turkish government is rather reticent in allowing access, for example, to the records of the Interior Ministry. So it's hard to place him in his class of organized criminal, which, he fancies himself as a kabadaya or a kind of, fixer, tough guy, extortionist, which is only a subset of organized crime within Turkey, and one that not necessarily is representative of, let's say, the really big or more lucrative elements of organized crime. The individuals that he is referring to, I'm thinking not only somebody, I'm not thinking about so much Mehmet R, because again, we don't even really know what Mehmet R does either. But others who are, oligarchs from Azerbaijan, or other prominent figures who are associated with, industry and investment. I think, there, we can surmise that, we're not talking about violence so much as perhaps financial crimes, or perhaps we're talking about, illicit trades. But again, this is all highly speculative. And I think that's the point, is that this element of Turkey's history has never been really made transparent. And there is a kind of concerted culture in Turkey to make sure that it remains obscure. I mean, among the principal crimes Peker, for example, has been charged with is formation of a criminal gang, which is a kind of an ironic charge because we don't necessarily know what his criminal gang does. So that sort of leads us to this question of, well, how do we know what his relationship with the state is, or what he, what his significance is in organized crime if we don't really know what he does?
Right, but I mean, just the fact that the records are so limited, considering, Turkey's landscape, especially at the moment. I mean, people are prosecuted and are charged for a lot less, and just the fact that these, records are limited. I mean, what does it say essentially about the relationship the state has with such shady figures?
Yeah, I mean, as an outsider looking in, I've always sort of marveled at the degree to which words hurt in Turkey, in which libelous claims often form the basis of criminal investigations, especially into noted figures. And obviously, it says a lot about prosecutorial initiative, that it's up to the prosecutor to decide whether, in their judgment, the words hurt. And clearly there seems to be a political calculation behind a lot of what's happening, insofar as the YouTube videos, I'm not necessarily if they're available in Turkey without a VPN.
They are,
but
they are for now, yes.
Right, and the fact that we see this, the open discussion of this within elements of the press would lead me to suggest that, they're not quite radioactive yet. Mm-hmm. And I suppose that in itself is significant. And your question is, rhetorically correct. It is rather remarkable that these are words that seemingly do not faze anyone within government just yet, although evidently Süleyman Soylu is perhaps beginning to reconsider that.
Yeah, and as you said, you know, it's not explosive. Have you been able to, I mean, evaluate the reaction of the opposition, for example? I mean, because, you know, soon, if things go as planned in 2023, we're going to have elections. And if the opposition wins, how should they or how can they fight against such long established linkages and connections?
Well, I think it's a great question. I mean, I think in that hypothetical world where some sort of opposition opponent is president, I think the one issue that I think defines this is transparency. Mm-hmm. That one should remember that, and I think this is why the videos are so resonant today with people who have seen them and who are discussing them, is that, you know, Sedat Peker represents a time in which Turkish politics was really opaque. People had generally negative impressions of the way the political system worked, of Turkish elites, of the nature of law enforcement, you know, that essentially that so much of the Turkish system was corrupt, and I'm speaking specifically of the 1990s. And Erdogan, you know, in 2001, 2002, campaigned on creating a political system that was much more reliable, competent, but also transparent. The phrase that was so often used then was clean hands. He was going to run a clean hands administration. And so here we are, you know, 20, 25 years later, and, you know, there is this sense of it being a back to the future moment, that, you know, that seemingly this aura has now, or this cloud has now descended upon Turkey and the government. So I mean, I think that, you know, one of the reasons why we have this conversation is because people do not necessarily, you know, trust or believe what they read in the newspaper, and do not necessarily believe that the administration and powerful individuals are clean. And I think that, you know, the cliche is that, you know, sunlight is the best disinfectant. And I think that, you know, what we should think about is greater transparency being, you know, really quite important.
Mm-hmm. Just to pick up on what you said lastly, you know, you mentioned obviously Erdogan when he was rallying for power in 2002, that, you know, the clean hand metaphor, you know, a more reliable, transparent system and so forth. And, you know, now the 20 years on, we see where we're at. Do you think it has anything to do, I mean, the AKP's relation with organized crime, does it have anything, it's the change in attitude? Is there a change in attitude? Perhaps that can be tied to its coalition with the MHP in any kind of way, or is it not really dependent on that?
Again, I think I could go on quite a bit about this, but I think more succinctly, I think the videos refer to two, I think, specific elements when we talk about the influence of organized crime in government. One is on the political side. Sedat Peker is representative. He is a celebrity within the far right. I mean, this is what made him politically important within recent elections, because he was someone who helped rally the MHP base in support of the governing coalition. And as I said, there is a historic, you know, long established historic tie between this segment of organized crime and the Turkish far right. So this is one element of the story. The other element of the story that you hear inferred in the videos, which again, is far more difficult to substantiate or validate, is the economic side. In that, you know, one thing that has dogged the government, especially in recent years, are charges of cronyism, charges of corruption, charges of, you know, illicit dealings. I'm thinking specifically of things like, you know, the sanctions busting regime organized by Halkbank. So we see that side of organized crime, you know, being, you know, kind of emerging from from the video as well. Now, again, these are all rather unsubstantiated charges, but I think in the minds of viewers, at least particularly those who are already pretty much in the tank for anyone but Recep Tayyip Erdogan, that resonates really well. That, of course, you have this kind of organic connection between the AKP and people who are involved in illicit dealings. We've seen evidence of it in lots of other ways as well. So I think in terms of the actual veracity, it's, in some ways it's immaterial because it already confirms the bias of people who had already believed such a thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Professor Ryan Gingeras, thank you so much for having joined us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
And now let's take a look at the coronavirus-related developments.
According to the data released by the Ministry of Health, on May 13th, the number of cases was 11,534, making the total number of patients reach 5,083,996. On May 13th, 238 people lost their lives due to the coronavirus, making the death toll become 44,059.
Looking for a safe holiday this summer? Come to the Turkish Riviera. Last summer, millions of guests enjoyed our sanitized resorts. This summer, we have all our staff vaccinated too. Sanitized resorts and vaccinated staff. We call it double safety for tourism. Our guests call it peace of mind. Come and enjoy the safe haven, the Turkish Riviera.
This video was released yesterday by the Ministry of Culture and Tourism. The promotion video shows tourism personnel wearing yellow face masks printed with "Enjoy, I am vaccinated," while tourists are seen not covering their faces. Upon its release, the video attracted outcry on social media. Social media users have said that the video placed health and welfare of tourists above locals and that they felt belittled. A majority of Turkish citizens have not yet been vaccinated due to a shortage of supplies. The video also drew severe condemnation from Turkish opposition politicians who called on Culture and Tourism Minister Nuri Ersoy to resign. Soon thereafter, the ministry removed the video from its Go Turkey social media account.
The first Eid al-Fitr prayer was held at the Hagia Sophia Grand Mosque after 87 years on May 13th. Despite the lockdown measures, thousands of people gathered inside and outside the Hagia Sophia for the morning prayer, marking the end of the Islamic holy fasting month of Ramadan.
Turkish Parliament Speaker Mustafa Şentop, Transport and Infrastructure Minister Adil Karaismailoğlu, Istanbul Governor Ali Yerlikaya, and Fatih Mayor Ergün Turan joined the huge crowds at Hagia Sophia for the Eid al-Fitr prayer, ending the holy month of Ramadan. Although Turkey has been under full lockdown since April 29 for a period of 17 days, the ruling Justice and Development Party allowed the mosques to remain open during this period. The Hagia Sophia was the largest cathedral in the world for over 900 years, until Istanbul was taken over by Ottoman Sultan Mehmet the Conqueror in 1453, after which the Hagia Sophia was converted into a mosque. In 1934, Turkey's founder Mustafa Kemal Atatürk converted the mosque into a museum. Last year, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared Hagia Sophia a mosque again after a top court ruled the ancient building's conversion to a museum was illegal.
Turkey has expressed support to Palestine in relation to the ongoing conflict with Israel, with a joint statement signed by all political parties in the Turkish parliament. Foreign Minister Çavuşoğlu made a separate statement that condemned the Israelis, underlining the importance to show a more significant act of solidarity.
Since the 6th of May, ethnic tensions have been rising in Jerusalem over a decision by the Israeli Supreme Court that called for the eviction of Palestinian residents in the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhoods of East Jerusalem. Protests began in Jerusalem over this decision, which quickly became a symbol for the historic expulsions of Palestinians from Israel. The protests turned into an armed conflict between Israel and Hamas, an Islamist group that rules Gaza. According to the data from the Israeli and Palestinian health officials on May 12, more than 67 Palestinians, including 16 children, have died since the start of conflict, while more than 6 Israelis, including the 5-year-old boy, have died during the two-way airstrikes. On May 13, A residential building containing the Turkish charity group Yardım Eli's office was also bombed during an attack by the Israeli warplanes. As a response to these brutal attacks, Turkey strongly condemned Israel with a joint declaration signed by all parties currently in the Turkish parliament. Turkey's recent efforts to normalize ties with Israel have also been derailed as a result of the armed conflict in the Gaza Strip. The joint statement signed by the ruling AKP, CHP, E Party, HDP, and MHP read, "As the Turkish parliament, we declare that we will always continue to react against Israel's aggressive actions aimed at eroding the status of Jerusalem and the Sharam al-Sharif and the attempts to usurp the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. We strongly declare that we will continue to defend the Palestinian case and the struggle of the fraternal Palestinian people for freedom, justice, and independence." The Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has issued a separate statement of press release regarding the ongoing attacks of the Israeli security forces against Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, during the press release in Saudi Arabia after meeting with his Saudi counterpart, the Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu said that condemning the violence is not enough to stop the violence, and that the Muslim community is expecting Turkey to take some steps. Çavuşoğlu was on a 2-day visit to Saudi Arabia to meet with his Saudi counterpart Prince Faisal bin Farhan to discuss bilateral relations, regional issues, the 2018 killing of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi in Istanbul, and the Israel-Palestine conflict. Çavuşoğlu further added that the meeting was concluded with the decision to continue their dialogue and that he invited his Saudi counterpart to visit Turkey as a continuation of holding talks. Medyascope editor-in-chief analyzed the mindset behind Turkey's possible militaristic support to Palestine. The ruling Justice and Development Party in Turkey has always kept the Palestine issue on top of its political agenda, and the party always took a clear stance on it. They did this to not only to garner more power in the international arena, but also to have an impact on the Islamic world, along with the aim to create a specific mass movement inside the country. And they did hold that power for a period of time. But then things have changed. Now, Turkey is a completely ineffective actor in the Palestine issue. They cannot do anything about it. Meanwhile, some people say that Turkey should send its soldiers to Jerusalem to fight. It is unbelievable. But at the same time, it is understandable. Because in recent times, Turkey has been only practicing hard power in their foreign policy. Somehow, Turkey gets involved in the civil war in Libya, in the civil war in Syria, or in the Azerbaijan-Armenia conflict. And this involvement is not through diplomacy, but through military. So, the language of foreign policy has been militarized as much as it can. And as a result, the first thing that comes into people's mind, especially those who expect AKP to take action, is to send soldiers.
May 11th marked the 10th year anniversary of the Istanbul Convention being opened for signature in Istanbul on May 11th, 2011. While Turkey was the first signatory of the convention, President Erdogan released a presidential decree on March 20, 2021 that withdrew Turkey from the document. The anniversary was marked with protests against this withdrawal and the demand for Turkey's renewed signature and application of the convention.
Turkey had been the first signatory state on the Istanbul Convention, officially the Council of Europe Convention on Preventing and Combating Violence Against Women and Domestic Violence, which mandates that all signatory states create legislation to protect women from violence. As of March 2019, it has been signed by 45 countries and the European Union. On March 12, 2012, Turkey became the first country to ratify the convention, followed by 33 other countries from 2013 to 2019. The convention came into force on the 1st of August, 2014. Turkey marked the 10th anniversary of the convention with the withdrawal of the country through a presidential decree on March 20th, 2021. While women's and LGBTQI+ organizations protested the withdrawal, an official statement was released by the presidency's Directorate of Communication, which claimed that the convention encouraged homosexuality. If the decision to withdraw is not re-evaluated, Turkey's official withdrawal from the convention will take effect starting July 1st, 2021. Women's organizations in Turkey organize protests online and in person. Social media users opted for the hashtag Istanbul Convention is 10 years old to express their messages of protest against the president's withdrawal.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. See you next Friday at 9 p.m. Good night.